The clang of the metal bucket hitting the tiled floor echoed through the school auditorium like a gunshot. The sting of humiliation burned hotter than the mop water soaking into my shoes as I stumbled back from the center of the stage. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the dozen pairs of eyes locked on me, teachers, students, and my fellow custodial staff, half shocked, half entertained, all silent. My supervisor, Mr. Havorson, stood above me, clipboard in one hand, his other still extended from where he'd swatted the mop from my grip. His voice, sharp and venom-laced, rang out for everyone to hear. "Don't you ever make me look bad in front of the principal again," he barked. A few teachers exchanged smirks. One custodian actually chuckled. I could feel the eyes of the entire school staff drilling into me. But then from the far corner of the hall came a voice so steady it sliced through the tension like a blade. "Sir." Every head turned toward Leo, my teenage son, who stood near the equipment cart, phone clutched to his chest. His eyes, dark and unflinching, locked onto my supervisor. "You shouldn't have done that," he said calmly. Something in his tone made the air in the room shift. I saw Havorson's shoulders stiffen. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, trying to recover his authority. Leo didn't flinch. "Because now the school board is going to see." The color drained from Havorson's face. Teachers exchanged confused glances, but I caught something else, small flickers of unease they couldn't quite name. "What are you implying, boy?" Havorson's voice was cracking now. Leo tilted his head, studying him like a science experiment gone wrong. "I've been recording you for weeks, Mr. Havorson, everything, and I sent it to the superintendent this morning." Silence gripped the auditorium. Havorson's expression shifted from confusion to panic in seconds. Staff began shifting in their seats, suddenly understanding that something far bigger than a clumsy janitor was unfolding before them. "The superintendent said to tell you," Leo continued, his voice steady and frighteningly calm, "that he's on his way." The murmuring started instantly, and the panic was visible on Havorson's face. But that wasn't the beginning. That was just the moment everything finally snapped. 3 hours earlier, I'd been pushing the buffer down the main hall, trying to ignore the dull ache in my back from last week's lesson. Havorson had caught me finishing the gym floor later than he liked and decided to make an example of me, kicking my mop bucket hard enough to splash my pants. I'd been wearing the same worn-out sneakers for years, the soles too thin to keep the cold water from seeping in. But I couldn't react, not with cleanup day coming, when every teacher and admin came to inspect our work. One wrong word and I'd lose my hours, maybe my job. "Sam, where are the spare garbage liners?" Havorson's voice boomed from the supply closet, making me flinch even from halfway down the hall. "Bottom shelf, left side," I called back, keeping my tone light to avoid another outburst. Leo sat on the janitor's bench, supposed to be finishing his homework, but I knew he was watching. He always watched now, sharp eyes reading every flicker of my expression, every hesitation in my voice. At 14, he'd learned to see the warning signs better than I had, how Havorson's jaw tightened before he barked an order, how his clipboard became a weapon when he pointed it in someone's face, how the silence before his anger was worse than the shouting. "Dad," Leo said quietly, not looking up from his notebook. "You okay?" The question hit harder than any insult. I'd lied so many times, said everything was fine, that Mr. Havorson was just stressed. That work was hard, but I could handle it. I whispered, "Yeah, kiddo, I'm fine." But Leo's pencil stopped mid-word. "No, you're not." Before I could answer, Havorson's heavy boots thudded down the hallway toward us. "Sam, this place still looks like a pigsty. The principal's going to be here in an hour and you can't even." He stopped mid-rant when he saw Leo watching him. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face, but it was gone before I could name it. "Leo, go wait in the office," he ordered. "I'm doing my homework right here," Leo said flatly. "Not anymore. Go. Dad's been cleaning all day." "Maybe don't, Leo," I cut in, my voice sharper than I wanted. "Go ahead." As he passed me, Leo gave my hand a quick squeeze, a tiny lifeline that nearly broke me. At the doorway, he turned back to Havorson. "Be nice to my dad," he said simply. The room went quiet. Havorson's eyes hardened. "Excuse me, he's been working since 6 a.m. without a break, so just be nice." The sheer audacity of a kid challenging him made Havorson freeze for a second. But I saw the flash in his eyes, the same one I'd seen before the lessons. I couldn't let it escalate. "Leo, go," I said quickly. He nodded. "Ed," but not before I caught that stubborn set in his jaw, the one I recognized from my father's face whenever he'd had enough of someone's nonsense. "Your kid's getting too mouthy," Halvorsen muttered. "You're raising him to be disrespectful." "He's just protective," I said carefully. "He doesn't like seeing." "Seeing what?" Halvorsen stepped closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "Are you telling him stories about me, Sam?" "No, because if you're poisoning him against me, there'll be consequences." He always said it like that, vague enough to dodge HR, sharp enough to make your stomach drop. The office phone rang down the hall, saving me from answering. Halvorsen straightened his polo, pasted on his fake, friendly smile, and headed off. "Showtime," he muttered. "Remember, we're the perfect team." The staff began filing into the auditorium for the cleanup day review like they owned the place. Teachers chatted in small clusters, casting the occasional glance toward us custodians as if we were the background props in their show. Halvorsen's face was all charm now, greeting every administrator with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He shook hands, cracked jokes, even patted Principal Baird on the back. You'd never guess that 10 minutes earlier he'd threatened me over a smudge on a locker door. I took my place near the equipment cart, pushing the mop in slow, even strokes across the polished wood floor, but I could feel Leo's gaze burning into the scene from his spot in the far corner. He had his phone in hand, casual, like a kid scrolling through social media, but I knew better. The inspection began with the science labs, then the gymnasium, then the main hallways. We followed behind like invisible shadows, Halvorsen feeding the principal a running commentary about how hard his team had worked to meet the school's high standards. Not once did he acknowledge the 14-hour shifts we'd been pulling all week, or the fact that 2 of our guys had called out sick from exhaustion. Every time Principal Baird nodded, Halvorsen puffed up a little more, as though my labor was his personal achievement. I bit my tongue. This wasn't the moment to fight him. By the time we reached the cafeteria, the staff were in good spirits. Someone joked about the custodial miracle that made the place smell like lemons instead of yesterday's chili. Halvorsen laughed loudest. "That's the kind of magic you get when you run a tight ship," he said, clapping me on the shoulder just hard enough to hurt. My jaw tightened. Leo's phone was angled toward us. The tension spiked when we got to the stage area in the auditorium. The floors gleamed, the curtains were spotless, and every chair had been wiped down. I'd been proud of this work until Halvorsen spotted one small streak on the metal bucket I'd left near the front. "Sam," he barked, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "What is this? You call this clean?" Before I could answer, he marched over and smacked the mop handle from my grip, sending it clattering across the stage. The bucket tipped dirty water spreading across my freshly polished floor. Gasps rippled through the group. "You just embarrassed me in front of my entire staff," he snarled, his voice dripping with scorn. My face burned, teachers exchanged looks, some amused, some uncomfortable. A couple of custodians smirked. My heart pounded in my ears. That's when Leo stepped forward, still holding his phone. "Sir," he said, voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. Halvorsen's head snapped toward him, irritation flashing in his eyes. "What? You shouldn't have done that," Leo said, calm as ice. Halvorsen scoffed. "And why's that?" "Because now the school board's going to see," Leo replied, his tone as matter-of-fact as if he were pointing out the weather. For a moment, the entire auditorium went still. Halvorsen blinked, thrown off by the confidence in a 14-year-old's voice. "What are you talking about? I've been recording you for weeks," Leo said, raising his phone slightly. "Everything you've said to my dad, everything you've done to him and the others, and I sent it all to the superintendent this morning." The shift in the room was immediate, confusion in the teachers, faces melting into dawning realization, the kind that makes people start calculating how quickly they can distance themselves from the person in trouble. Halvorsen's posture crumbled by inches. "What kind of nonsense?" the superintendent said to tell you, Leo cut in, his voice like a scalpel, "that he's on his way." Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." Another backed away toward the door as if physical distance might shield them from the fallout. Halvorson's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone to back him up. No one moved, and that's when he started to pale. 1 month earlier, I hadn't realized Leo had already started his mission. It began the night I came home with a split lip from Whir. Halvorson had slammed a supply closet door into me by accident. I told Leo I'd walked into a shelf. He didn't believe me. "Dad," he said, "I know you're lying." That's when he told me about his school project documenting workplace dynamics. He said his teacher encouraged students to record examples of how people treat each other. I knew instantly what he was doing. "Leo, this is dangerous. If he finds out, he won't," he said. "I'm careful." His voice carried a steel I didn't know he had. Over the next few weeks, he recorded everything, Halvorson mocking me in front of other staff, berating us for minor mistakes, taking credit for our work. He kept the clips short but damning. He backed them up in 3 different places. He even managed to get footage of Halvorson snapping at other custodians and shouting at a cafeteria worker who spilled juice near the gym doors. I tried to tell him to stop. "Dad," he said, showing me a video of Halvorson jabbing me in the chest with his clipboard, "someone has to protect you, and I know who to send this to when it's time." When I asked who, he just said, "Someone who hates bullies more than we do." 2 weeks before cleanup day, Leo made his first call to the superintendent's office. I didn't know until I overheard him asking, "If a staff member was hurting people and making the school look bad, would you want to know?" The pause on the other end was long. "Yes, son, yes, I would." Leo smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." That's when I realized my kid wasn't just recording for a school project. He was building a case, and he wasn't planning to wait until I was ready to use it. He was going to choose the moment himself. The morning of cleanup day arrived with that heavy, brittle tension I'd come to dread. I was in the storage room at 6 a.m., sorting supplies, when Halvorson came in and tossed me a stained rag. "Wipe down the gym bleachers again. I saw dust," he said. "I'd already done them twice yesterday." "Yes, sir," I replied, keeping my voice level. He lingered in the doorway, watching me like a hawk. "Remember," he said, "today we're the perfect crew. No mistakes, no backtalk. No embarrassing me in front of the principal or the board. You can manage that, Sam." I gave a tight nod. Then he turned to Leo, who was leaning against the doorframe pretending to scroll on his phone. "And you, kid, no more of that smart mouth you've been showing lately. Students should be seen, not heard." Leo looked up and met his gaze. "I understand, Mr. Halvorson." His voice was flat, but I caught the edge underneath. Halvorson didn't. He walked away satisfied. By mid-morning, the building buzzed with activity. Teachers were pinning up bulletin boards, cafeteria staff were arranging trays for the complimentary lunch, and we custodians were in constant motion. Halvorson shadowed me all day, nitpicking every move. "Straighten that table. No, not like that. Faster, slower, you missed a spot." Each criticism was punctuated with a smirk or a shake of the head, his little performance for anyone within earshot. I kept my head down. My back ached, my hands were raw from bleach, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of snapping. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leo hovering near the gym entrance, his phone angled just enough to catch Halvorson's gestures. At noon, the superintendent's car pulled into the parking lot. I didn't notice at first, too busy polishing the entryway glass, but Leo did. He slipped away, his phone still in hand, and reappeared moments later looking calm, almost smug. "You'll want to be in the auditorium in about an hour," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Because that's when the show starts." Before I could question him further, the PA crackled to life announcing the inspection route. Halvorson clapped his hands like a coach before a big game. "All right, team, let's give them something to remember." They started in the science wing, and as we trailed behind, I realized how carefully Leo had chosen his angles. Every time Halvorson made a jab at me, "Don't trip over that cord, Sam. Try not to scuff the wax you just put down." Leo was there, catching the words and the sneer. Teachers began glancing between us, some frowning. Maybe they were putting the pieces together. By the time we reached the cafeteria, whispers had started. One of the cafeteria ladies even shot me a look that seemed to say, "Hold on, something's coming." And then we hit the auditorium stage. My pride and joy. I'd scrubbed every inch until it gleamed. But Havorson wasn't looking for excellence. He was looking for a moment to remind everyone he was in charge. His gaze landed on a faint streak on the mop bucket I'd left by the curtain. He seized his opportunity. "Sam," he barked, "what is this? I told you to keep things spotless for today." Before I could answer, he strode over and knocked the mop from my hands. It clanged against the stage floor, echoing through the room. The bucket tipped, sending a wave of murky water across the boards I'd polished for hours. Gasps from the staff, a chuckle from one of the assistant coaches. Heat rose up my neck. My fingers curled into fists, but I forced myself still. "You just embarrassed me in front of the entire staff," Havorson snarled. "Do you think this reflects well on us?" His words were loud enough to carry to the back row, and that's when Leo stepped out from behind the equipment cart. "Sir," he said, his voice calm but carrying like a bell. Havorson turned, startled. "What is it, boy? You shouldn't have done that," Leo said. "Why's that?" Havorson asked, already trying to regain the upper hand. Leo tilted his head. "Because now the school board's going to see." The room froze, someone coughed. Havorson blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I've been recording you, Mr. Havorson, for weeks," Leo said, holding up his phone. "Every insult, every time you shoved Dad's shoulder or kicked his mop bucket. And I sent it all to the superintendent this morning." The shift in the air was palpable, teachers leaning forward, whispers darting through the rows. Havorson's face drained of color. You did what?" "The superintendent said to tell you," Leo went on, each word crisp, "that real leaders don't humiliate their staff, and that bullies who hide behind their titles are cowards. And he said to tell you he's on his way." The murmurs swelled. One of the teachers muttered, "Oh boy." The assistant principal crossed his arms and stepped back as if to distance himself. Havorson's eyes darted from face to face, looking for support. He found none. That's when the faint rumble of an engine outside reached my ears. It grew louder until a door slammed in the hallway. A voice, firm and unmistakable, carried into the auditorium. "Where's Mr. Havorson?" The superintendent had arrived. The auditorium doors swung open with a force that made the back row flinch. Superintendent Keller stepped inside, flanked by the head of human resources and the district's legal counsel. His presence filled the room not with noise, but with a calm authority that seemed to draw every eye. He scanned the space once, taking in the tipped bucket, the murky water on the stage, my mop lying abandoned, and Havorson standing rigid beside me. Then his gaze landed on Leo, still holding his phone, and something in his expression softened briefly before hardening again. "Mr. Havorson," Keller said, his tone neutral but edged with steel, "sit down." It wasn't a request. Havorson hesitated. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down." The weight of the command seemed to press on him until, reluctantly, he obeyed, dropping into the nearest folding chair. The superintendent stepped forward, addressing Leo first. "Son, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Leo said, his voice steady. "My dad's the one you should ask about." Keller's gaze shifted to me. "Mr. Carson." My mouth was dry, but I managed. "I've been better." That seemed to be enough. Keller nodded slightly to the HR director, who moved to the center of the stage, tablet in hand. "We've reviewed a series of recordings sent to our office early this morning," she announced. They document repeated verbal harassment, intimidation, and instances of physical contact by Mr. Havorson toward custodial staff, including Mr. Carson. A ripple went through the audience, shocked whispers, sidelong glances. The videos also show similar treatment toward cafeteria staff and at least one student volunteer. Havorson's face went red. "You can't just, those videos are private." The legal counsel stepped forward, voice calm. "They were recorded in public workspaces where there is no expectation of privacy. Furthermore, they were provided by a minor and his guardian to report workplace misconduct. It's all within district policy." Havorson opened his mouth again, but Keller raised a hand. "I've seen enough. The evidence is clear. Mr. Havorson, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. You will vacate the premises today, and will have no contact with any staff member until the conclusion of the district's formal investigation. The gasp that went through the auditorium was louder this time. Halvorson's gaze darted wildly around the room, looking for someone to intervene. "We've worked together for years," he said to the principal. "Tell them this isn't who I am." But Principal Baird wouldn't meet his eyes. "I've seen the videos," she said quietly. "It is exactly who you are." Halvorson turned toward a group of teachers. "You know me, we know what we saw," one of them cut in. "You made us watch it." His posture sagged. For the first time in years, I saw him without the bluster, without the swagger, just small and cornered. Keller turned to me. "Mr. Carson, on behalf of the district, I want to apologize for what you've endured. We failed to act sooner. That changes now." I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. Leo stepped C. Loser to me, his phone finally at his side. The HR director handed me an envelope. "Inside, you'll find notice of a temporary reassignment with full pay while we sort staffing. You'll also find information on the district's support resources, including legal aid if you wish to pursue further action." My hands shook as I accepted it. The applause started hesitantly, somewhere in the middle rows, but it spread until the whole auditorium was clapping. Not for me, I thought, but for the fact that Halvorson was done. Security arrived to escort him out. As he was led down the aisle, he glanced back at me. "You'll regret this," he muttered, low enough that only I heard. I didn't flinch this time. Leo stepped in front of me, looking him dead in the eye. "No, you will," he said. The words hit like a closing door. Halvorson didn't look back again. When the last of the staff dispersed, Keller crouched down to Leo's level. "That took courage," he said. "You didn't just help your dad, you made this school better for everyone." Leo shrugged, but I saw the pride in his eyes. "Grandpa says bullies only understand consequences," he replied. Keller smiled faintly. "Your grandpa's a smart man." That evening, Leo and I packed up my work locker together. The space felt different, lighter, without Halvorson's shadow in it. As we left, Leo asked, "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, locking the door for the last time. "Now we go home, and tomorrow we figure out what comes next." What came next was more than I'd expected. 2 weeks later, life had taken on a strange, quiet rhythm. Without Halvorson prowling the halls, my shifts felt almost peaceful. The other custodians joked more, the cafeteria ladies lingered to chat, and the teachers actually said thank you when we helped them. The district kept me on full pay during the investigation, assigning me light duties in the library and main office. I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I could do my job without looking over my shoulder. Leo came by after school most days, still carrying his phone, though now more out of habit than necessity. "Old habits die hard," he said with a smirk. I didn't argue. The board's findings came in at the end of the month. The report confirmed everything: repeated violations of conduct policy, harassment, intimidation, physical aggression. Halvorson's termination was permanent, his teaching license flagged with a misconduct record that would follow him if he ever tried to work in a school again. The superintendent called me into his office to let me know personally. "You did good work here, Mr. Carson," he said. "And your son, well, let's just say he's going to make one hell of a leader someday." I glanced at Leo, who was slouched in the waiting chair, pretending to be bored, but I saw the flicker of pride cross his face. Outside, Leo asked if I missed Halvorson. The answer came quicker than I expected. "I don't miss being humiliated in front of people who should have been my colleagues. I don't miss feeling like I couldn't breathe without it being wrong. And I definitely don't miss watching you watch me go through it." He nodded slowly. "I don't miss any of that either." Then he grinned. "But I do kind of miss the look on his face when you realized he was done for." We both laughed, the sound echoing off the empty hallway. Months passed and the story became part of school lore. The custodian's son who took down a supervisor made the local news for a weekend, and then it faded, except among the staff, where it was whispered whenever someone crossed a line. Teachers who used to ignore me now asked my opinion. Students nodded at me in the halls. And Leo carried himself differently now, taller somehow, even if his height hadn't changed. He joined the debate club, started helping the AV team, and volunteered to give tour to new students. He told me once, it's easier to speak up when you've already seen it work. One afternoon, nearly a year after Halvorsen left, Leo came home from school with a serious look. "Dad," he said, "a girl in my class told me the head lunch aide has been yelling at her and her friends. She asked me what she should do. I set down my coffee. What did you tell her?" "I told her she's not tattling if she's telling the truth to stop someone from being a bully. I told her to write it down, keep track of what happens. And I told her if she needed help, she could come to me." He paused. "Was that okay?" I smiled. "That was better than okay." We never saw Halvorsen again. Rumor had it he'd moved out of state, maybe working in a warehouse. Sometimes I wondered if he thought about that day, if he replayed the moment Leo stepped forward and took away all his power. Maybe he convinced himself it was unfair, that we'd set him up. But I knew the truth. He de-set himself up the first time he thought humiliating someone made him strong. He just never met the wrong kid at the wrong time until Leo. The night before the anniversary of cleanup day, Leo and I were sitting on the porch, watching the last of the sun sink behind the school roof in the distance. "You think other kids could do what I did?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "I hope they never have to," I said. "But if they did, yeah, I think they could, especially if they had the guts to stand up for someone when it mattered." Leo was quiet for a while, then said, "Grandpa says people like Halvorsen don't change unless they have to. And the only way they have to is if someone makes them." I chuckled. "Sounds like something he'd say." Leo grinned. "Sounds like something I'd say too." I looked at him then, this kid who'd been brave enough to take on an adult in front of an entire room, who taught me that sometimes you don't wait for the right moment, you make it. "Leo," I said, "you know what I think." "What?" "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." He shrugged, but his smile said he'd heard me. "I learned it from you," he said, "and maybe you just forgot for a while." The next day, as I walked into the school for my shift, I passed the auditorium stage. The floors were still clean, the bucket was in its place, and I couldn't help but think of that moment when everything had changed, not just for me, but for everyone who'd been watching. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a kid holding up a phone and saying 5 words that make a bully pale. And sometimes that's all it takes to make sure they never forget. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of courage and justice. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that standing up matters, because sometimes one brave voice can change everything.